The morning I found out my husband had been sleeping with our neighbor, I was standing in our kitchen in Mississauga making oatmeal. That's the part nobody tells you about betrayal. It doesn't announce itself with dramatic music. It arrives on a Tuesday while you're stirring brown sugar into a pot and your phone buzzes with a message that wasn't meant for you. He'd sent it to me by accident. One line, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Miss you already." I stood there for a long time. The oatmeal burned. The smoke detector went off and I just let it scream. His name was Derek. We'd been married for 6 years. We met at a firm Christmas party in downtown Toronto when I was 26 and he was 31, and he'd seemed so sure of himself, so solid. I was a junior accountant at the time, still figuring out how to exist in the world as a grown woman. He was a project manager at a construction company, good salary, good posture, good at making my parents think I'd done well for myself. We bought a semi-detached in Mississauga 3 years in, painted the kitchen a warm sage green that I still loved. Got a dog together, a golden retriever, we named after a street in the neighborhood. I thought we were building something. Turns out he was building something too, just not with me. Her name, I found out later, was Simone. She and her husband had moved in 2 houses down from us about a year and a half before. They were from Vancouver originally, relocating for his work. I'd had them over for dinner twice. I'd lent her my ice cream maker for a birthday party she threw. I'd liked her. That part made it worse somehow. That I'd had no instinct for it at all. Her husband's name was Callum. I didn't know Callum well. He was quieter than Simone, worked long hours in financial consulting, traveled to Calgary a lot. We'd exchanged maybe 40 words total before the afternoon he knocked on my front door, 4 days after I'd confronted Derek and watched my husband pack a bag and walk out of the sage green kitchen without looking back. I almost didn't answer. I was still in the clothes I'd slept in, which I realize now I'd been wearing for 2 days. The dog was pressed against my legs. I looked through the front window and didn't recognize him at first. He was standing with his hands in his coat pockets, staring at the ground. He looked the way I felt. I opened the door. He said, "I think we need to talk." I said, "I know." We sat across from each other at my kitchen table, and for a moment neither of us said anything. I put the kettle on because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. He kept his coat on like he wasn't sure he was staying. "She told me everything," he said finally. "Last night, I think she told me because Derek told her you knew and she panicked." I nodded. I'd figured as much. "How long?" I asked. 14 months. He said it quietly like he was ashamed of the number 2, even though it wasn't his fault. 14 months. Our dog was 11 months old. I'd been picking out tile for the upstairs bathroom during 14 months of this. I'd been making Christmas plans and worrying about whether to refinance early and debating if we were ready to talk about having a baby. "I'm sorry," Callum said, and he meant it, I could tell. Not a social sorry. A real one from somewhere low in his chest. "Me too," I said. We drank tea. We talked for 2 hours. He was calm in a way I wasn't. Composed, but clearly broken underneath. The kind of composure that comes not from being okay, but from having already cried so hard you've gone numb on the other side of it. At some point he said, "I need to tell you something, and I want you to hear me out before you say anything." I set down my mug. "I've been looking into some things," he said, "about Derek, about his company accounts." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. I looked at the screen. I didn't understand what I was reading at first. It looked like business records, filings, corporate registry information. "Derek's been running contracts through a numbered company," Callum said. "I'm a financial consultant. When Simone told me last night, I was so angry I couldn't sleep, so I started digging. I know I shouldn't have, but I did. And what I found," he paused, "it's not small." I kept staring at the screen. "What is it?" "He's been routing construction subcontracts through a shell company. The shell company is registered to a silent partner. He paused. The silent partner is your mother-in-law. The room went very quiet. I knew my mother-in-law. I'd bought her flowers on Mother's Day for 6 years. She taught me how to make Derek's favorite soup. She had a little bungalow in Burlington and a garden she was proud of and a framed photo of Derek's university graduation on her mantel. She doesn't know, I said immediately. Callum looked at me carefully. She signed the papers. She wouldn't have understood what she was signing. Derek handles all her affairs. Has for years. She trusts him completely. I stopped. He used her. He put her name on it so that if anything came apart, she'd be the one standing there holding it. I felt sick. Callum nodded slowly. That's what I think too, which is part of why I'm here. The contracts went back 2 years. Callum had already built a preliminary picture of what was happening, subcontractors getting paid out of the shell company, invoices inflated, the difference skimmed and moved. Not millions, but significant. Enough. Enough to explain the trips Derek had taken for work to Montreal and Ottawa. Enough to explain the savings account discrepancies I'd noticed twice and asked about and been smoothly reassured on both times. Why are you bringing this to me? I asked. Callum looked down at his hands. Because I don't want to go to the authorities alone. I don't have standing. You do. You're his spouse. Joint finances. You could argue you were directly defrauded. And because he stopped. Started again. Because if this comes out and your mother-in-law is named in it, she needs someone who will protect her. Someone who will make clear she was a victim of this too. I thought about her garden, her soup. That photo on the mantel? Okay, I said. I called a lawyer the next morning. A woman I found through a colleague, someone who specialized in financial fraud and family law both. In retrospect, exactly the right combination. Her office was on King Street West and she wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and she did not waste a single word. She listened to everything I said. She looked at the documents Callum had pulled together. She set her glasses down on the desk and said, "You have more here than you think." The weeks that followed were the strangest of my life. I went to work every day. I walked the dog every morning. I answered texts from Derek about logistics, what to do with the Netflix account, who was keeping the car seats for my sister's baby that we'd been storing in the garage. And I said nothing about what I knew. My lawyer advised me to stay quiet. Discovery would come in its own time. I had coffee with Callum twice during that period. Not romantic, I want to be clear about that. We were just two people navigating the same wreckage from different angles, and there was a particular comfort in talking to someone who didn't need any backstory. He was grieving too. He was figuring out what his life looked like now. We talked about practical things, lawyers, timelines, what to tell people. Occasionally, we talked about other things. He was funny in a dry, understated way that I hadn't noticed before. He'd grown up in Victoria. He liked bad action films and good coffee and hiking trails that took at least 3 hours. His daughter, they'd had a daughter before the move, she was 4 years old, had just learned to write her own name and thought it was the most remarkable achievement in human history. I liked him in the way that you like someone who is decent and present and treats you like you make sense. My mother-in-law called me in the 3rd week. She'd been trying to reach Derek, and he'd been avoiding her, and she was confused and frightened. I drove to Burlington and sat with her in her kitchen and told her as gently as I knew how that Derek and I were separating, that there were some issues that had come up, and that I needed her to trust me a little longer before I could explain everything. She looked at me for a long time. She was 71 years old and sharper than people gave her credit for. "Is my son in trouble?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She closed her eyes. "Did he hurt you?" "Yes," I said again. She reached across the table and took my hand. "Then we'll deal with it," she said. "Tell me what you need." I had to look away. I stared at the photo on her mantel, Derek at 22, grinning in a cap and gown. And I thought about how a person can be so thoroughly fooled by someone they love. How the love doesn't protect you. How it's sometimes the very thing that makes the blindfold fit so well. The disclosure came in month 2. Derek's lawyer made the financial filings, and the shell company surfaced exactly as Callum had predicted. When my lawyer presented the evidence we gathered, independent of the official process, carefully compiled, legally obtained, the picture became undeniable. Derek called me the night it happened. He was not calm. He went through several stages in that single phone call: denial, then anger, then something that sounded almost like the little boy underneath the project manager, scared and cornered and unable to talk his way out. "You set me up," he said. "You set yourself up," I said. I just stopped looking away. He had nothing to say to that. His mother's name was cleared within the month. My lawyer made sure of it. A formal record that she had signed documents she did not understand, presented to her by a family member in a position of trust, without legal counsel or independent advice. It wasn't difficult to establish. The paper trail made her innocence obvious once someone was actually looking for it. I called her when it was done. She cried. Not the shaky, frightened crying from before, but something more like relief. The kind of crying that happens when a door finally opens after you've been pressing against it in the dark. "I'm sorry," she said, and she meant for Derek, for the whole thing, for the soup and the Mother's Day flowers and the years of ordinary kindness that had occurred alongside something she hadn't known was rotten. "Don't be," I said. "None of this was yours." Derek was terminated from his company and faced a civil suit. The firm's insurers became involved. It took another 8 months to fully resolve, and my lawyer kept me informed at every step, and I will tell you that there is a specific, particular satisfaction in watching a legal process do exactly what it was built to do. Not revenge, not spite, just the slow, thorough work of the truth settling into the record where it belonged. I finalized my divorce 13 months after that Tuesday morning with the burned oatmeal. It was a gray November afternoon, the kind of day that in Ontario feels like the sky is pressing down on everything. And I walked out of my lawyer's office on King Street West and stood on the sidewalk and breathed in cold air that tasted like rain and car exhaust, and the distant smoke from someone's fireplace, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Light, just lighter, like something I'd been bracing against for over a year had finally let go. I sold the house in Mississauga, kept the dog, found an apartment in the east end of Toronto, 3rd floor, with a window that looked out over a maple tree that turned absurd colors in October. I started cooking properly again. I called my friends back. I took a weekend trip to Prince Edward Island with my sister that I hadn't realized I needed until we were standing on a red sand beach in the wind, and she grabbed my arm and said, "You look like yourself again." Callum and I stayed in touch. That's probably the part people are most curious about, so I'll tell it plainly. His divorce finalized 6 months before mine. He stayed in Mississauga for his daughter's sake, kept her in the same daycare, the same rhythms. We had dinner for the first time as something other than two wounded strangers sharing information, sometime in the spring. He brought terrible wine and we made fun of it together, and I remember thinking, this is what easy feels like. I'd forgotten. I'm not going to say it was simple. We were both still finding our footing. His daughter was going through a hard stretch of adjustment. I had my own rebuilding to do, my own silences I needed to sit with before I filled them with someone new. We went slowly. Some weeks we didn't see each other at all, and that was fine. Neither of us was performing anything. But there is something that happens when you've seen a person in their worst moment and they've seen you in yours, and you've both chosen again and again to be honest and careful and kind. Something accumulates. Trust, maybe, or just the particular safety of being known. His daughter, when she finally met me properly, assessed me for about 45 seconds and then asked if I wanted to see her room. She had 11 stuffed animals she had named and a drawing of our solar system on the wall that she'd made herself. Mercury was enormous and Jupiter was tiny, but she'd done it from memory, which she considered sufficient. I told her it was. She seemed satisfied with that. I don't have a tidy summary to offer. My life isn't a lesson. It's just mine, still in progress, in a Toronto apartment with a maple tree outside and a dog who has claimed the best spot on the sofa regardless of what I have to say about it. What I can tell you is this: the morning I stood in that kitchen and let the smoke alarm go off, I thought my life was ending. I thought everything I'd trusted had turned out to be a hollow thing, and I'd wasted years filling it up. But the hollow thing wasn't my life. It was just him and the story I'd built around him. The rest of it, my work, my friendships, my mother-in-law in her Burlington bungalow, my sister on that red sand beach, a man who brings bad wine and makes me laugh about it, all of that was real. All of that held. It held even when I couldn't. I think about the smoke detector a lot, how I just stood there and let it scream. There's something in that image that stays with me. Not the betrayal itself, not the message on the phone, but the part where I did nothing. Where I was so stunned by what I was seeing that I couldn't even reach up and press the button to make the noise stop. I've thought about why that detail keeps coming back. And I think it's because it was the last moment before I had to become someone different, someone who moved. What followed wasn't graceful. I didn't handle it with dignity at every step. I cried in parking lots. I wore the same clothes for 2 days. I made decisions out of exhaustion that I had to quietly undo later. But I kept moving. That's the thing I've come to understand about resilience. It doesn't look the way people expect. It doesn't look like strength. It looks like continuing anyway, even when continuing feels absurd. Derek made a series of choices, and each one built on the last. The affair was a choice. Hiding money through a numbered company was a choice. Putting his mother's name on documents she didn't understand. That was a choice that told me everything I needed to know about who he actually was. Not a man who made one terrible mistake, but someone who, when cornered, reached for the person who trusted him most and used her as a shield. That's not bad luck. That's character. And character eventually shows itself. It always does. Callum showing up at my door was unexpected, but looking back, it made a kind of sense. He was someone who, when faced with the same wreckage, chose honesty over self-protection. He could have stayed quiet, gathered his own evidence, let the legal process unfold without involving me. Instead, he knocked on my door. He sat at my table and told me the truth even when it was uncomfortable and uncertain, and he had no idea how I'd respond. That kind of integrity, the quiet, unglamorous kind, is rarer than people think, and I recognized it because I was trying to practice it myself. There's a version of the story where I stay small, where I accept the reassurances, look away from the account discrepancies, keep painting rooms and making plans and telling myself that what I can't see can't hurt me. A lot of people do that. I understand why. It's exhausting to see clearly. It costs something. But his mother deserved someone who would see clearly on her behalf. She had signed papers she didn't understand because she trusted her son, and she was 71 years old, and none of it was her fault. Choosing to protect her wasn't strategy. It was just the right thing to do. Sometimes that's all ethics is, noticing who is vulnerable in the situation in front of you and deciding that matters. My sister told me I looked like myself again, standing on that beach in Prince Edward Island. I've thought about what that means. I think it means that somewhere in the previous year, through all the meetings with lawyers and the difficult phone calls and the mornings I had to talk myself into getting up, I had actually been building something, not recovering the life I had before, building a different one. One where I knew, in a way I hadn't before, what I was made of. The maple tree outside my Toronto apartment turns a color in October that I genuinely cannot describe. The dog has claimed the sofa. Someone brings bad wine and we laugh about it. I think that's enough. I think it's more than enough.